Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another broadcast of Northwest Georgia Cryptics. I am Rick Weaver, and my co host, of course, Mr. Blake Duckworth. Tonight we have a guest from here in Georgia, Mr. Chuck Turner. Chuck will be coming on and giving his encounter stories that he's had over the years. Uh, Blake, you want to go ahead and open the show, bud?
How's everyone doing this week? As always, guys, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button, bell notification, like, and a comment. Like I said, I hope everyone's having a good week. A couple more days till Friday, so hope everyone enjoys their weekend. And let's give Chuck a warm welcome.
All right. Mr. Chuck, how's it going, buddy?
It's going good, Ricky. How are you?
We're doing great here on this end. A little tired from working this week, but doing all right.
Yeah.
All right, Chuck, as we told everybody, just introduce yourself and tell the folks a little bit about yourself and go from there.
All right. Well, I'm Chuck Turner. I'm originally from Cleveland, Georgia. I grew up in Hartwell, Georgia. We moved here when I was 2 and lived here my whole life except for time I spent away whenever I was in the Army and then a little while after that. Like I said, I'm, born and bred Georgia boy. Always have loved the outdoors. I still hunt and fish, and I spent quite a while in the Army, and then traveled around a little bit after I got out of the Army, including my time when I was in the Army. I've been to 43 countries in my life, and seen a lot of the world. So,
Hey, thank you for your service, brother.
That's who I am.
Thank you for your service.
I got a wife, and well, thank you guys. I've got a wife and 8 wonderful grandkids, and my wife just hollered 9. We just had one more, and I miscounted.
Starting to get up there, kind of hard to keep count.
Yeah, my mind remembers things, but my mouth don't. So it ain't my mouth's fault. It ain't my mind's fault. It's my mouth's fault.
Right. Well, hey, I'll tell you, Chuck. My mother and dad lived to be into their 80s, and they had, God, I don't know what the grandkids, great grandkids. Mother, I used to laugh at her. She told me when the great grandkids started coming on, she just lost count. She just didn't know what to tell anybody how many she had.
My grandmother.
My grandmother. She'll go down the list of names like, she's trying to tell something to one of the kids or something, one of the grandkids. I mean, they get called every name in the book half the time before she gets the right
name. My grandmother, she would, we'll talk about my Uncle David here in a little bit, but my grandmother, as she was calling names, she would call the roll to include the dog. Smokey before she got to David's name.
Got the right one.
So, but I guess y'all want to hear some things that happened to me over the years.
Yeah, go right ahead. I got to take this call.
First thing that ever happened to me is I was about 12. My sister was She was probably 6, and we were outside our house. If anybody knows where Hart State Park is in Hartwell, up there at the 4-way stop, there's a little house on your right there, and we lived there.
But listen, I'm right in the middle of a podcast. I'll run you something down a little bit.
Blake, do I need to wait on Rick?
11.
Yeah, we can wait on him.
Okay.
Can't hear much over his big mouth anyways.
When he takes some headphones off, ain't nobody supposed to be able to hear him either.
There we go. We're talking.
So anyway,
I was talking about how big a mouth you got, Ricky.
Oh man, I'm sorry about all that.
but we lived in that little house, and there was a grape arbor that had muscadines growing on it, and me and my little sister was out there, and I talked to her this afternoon, and we discussed it, and it's only the second time we've ever talked about it. We saw something. Still to this day, I have no clue what it was. The only thing that I can tell you is that it was definitely a malevolent being. There was nothing good about it. It was about maybe 3 feet tall, human body plan. However, its arms and legs were longer than proportionally. The torso was shorter than what a person would be, and the arms and legs were longer than what a person should be. Big, wide, gaping mouth, pointed teeth. She and I both saw that thing, and she screamed, and we both ran to the house. And, we did not, neither one of us ever mentioned that to each other until I was probably 40, and she was probably 34 before we ever talked about that thing. So 30 years, before we ever even mentioned it to each other. And when we sat there and talked about it, it was like a relief off of both of us because we had both, seen the same thing. We just never talked about it before. So that's the first crazy thing that ever happened to me. And actually, the only visual sighting of anything I've ever had. I'll tell you about the one that happened up in the mountains. Unless y'all got any questions about the first thing that happened.
Yeah. So I mean, do you think it was, like a demonic entity, or I mean, was it more of just maybe like something residual you saw, or intelligent, or?
No, Blake, I'm a Christian. I got a Christian flag hanging right beside my bed. I got my Bible right here beside me. I read my Bible every day. I love the Lord. And to me, there's no other way to explain that thing other than demonic.
Yeah.
I have nothing physical that I could reference that thing.
Yeah, it's something shouldn't have been on this earth, or shouldn't have been present.
Yes. I mean, when you say something that shouldn't be on this earth, a lot of people consider a Sasquatch something that shouldn't be on this earth. I'm not in that camp. But, as far as that thing, no. That thing was not of this earth. It was something, the only explanation I have is something demonic. Like I said, you could tell and we talked about this evening too, just its presence, just its demeanor, its character, it had nothing but malice on its mind. I mean, it wanted to do evil.
Well, was it more of a shadow, or did you actually physically see?
We physically saw a being. This was
any
not
details you could tell.
Like I said, it had a wide mouth, pointed teeth, just an evil look on its face. And like I said, it had, basic human body plan, arms, legs, torso, head. But its torso was really short compared to everything else.
Yeah.
Like it didn't have a chest and a belly. It was all one. Just take somebody's torso and squash it and make them 3 feet tall with really spindly arms and legs, and that's the body shape of this thing.
Now, after, I know you said that y'all didn't talk about it. I mean, once you left the area and went home, did you have any type of feeling far as, something not necessarily attaching, but just in your presence, or?
No, other than I'm not going outside at night for a while. No. I mean, that was the only, no matter what has ever happened to me in my life, you're not going to keep me inside. I'm going outside. I'm going into the woods. If there's evil things out there, then I know who I got on my side. And if it's something physical that's evil, I know what I can take with me when I go out there.
Well, you go out in evil just going out in public nowadays. I mean, you know.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Just being in humans' presence is evil enough nowadays.
Yep. The second thing that happened, I was about, I don't know, 18, 19. So it probably been 87, 88, 89, somewhere around in there. We went camping up above. Do y'all know where Robertstown is? Up above Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, we went up toward the head of the Chattahoochee River, up there above Robertstown camping.
Right.
Me and a girl that I was dating. And about 1 o'clock, I mean, nothing weird had happened, nothing strange. I had been through Army basic training by that point. I was in the National Guard for a few years before I went on active duty. So I've always, when I'm outside, I've always been hyper aware. You know, I guess my dad was a Marine in Vietnam, and that's just something he's always taught me is, you know, no matter what, you need to pay attention to your surroundings. And anytime I'm camping or out in the, especially if I'm camping, I have trouble sleeping. I won't say I have trouble sleep. I sleep very lightly if I sleep outside.
You're listening to every sound, every movement. And...
Yeah. If I'm asleep in this bed right here, a tornado could come through and it might not wake me up. But if I'm outside, I can hear a rat poop. I mean, that's you know.
Right.
But about 1:30 in the morning, I could hear something walking outside of our tent, and y'all have probably seen those campsites. It's granite dust, basically. They little small chips of granite and granite dust that they put on them things because it packs so hard. Right. But it'll still accept the tent stake, you know. But right. It don't get muddy. It's perfect aggregate for a campsite. I could hear something walking. I couldn't tell how heavy it was, or you know, not a whole lot about it at that point. But then I heard something. Like I told y'all before, I've been to 43 countries in my life, and looking back on it, the noises that this thing was making was a language. I don't know what kind of language. It's not a language I've ever heard, but it was language.
I got a question before you go. Now, was this language, if you could describe it, did it sound like words without like pronunciation almost, or without syllables?
I can tell you almost exactly what it sounds like. If you will listen to the Sierra sound, that Ron Moorhead and Al Berry did. That, and I'm going to do the best I can, but the part in there where that thing's, that was what I heard that night.
So you heard Samurai Chatter pretty much.
Blake and I have been right there with you. We've heard it too.
It's I got cold chills right now, just you know, thinking back on it. But and that was, you know, again 34, 35 years ago. But I could hear something else down closer to the river. It never vocalized like the one that was up closer to us, what, you know, did. It basically sounded like the one that was closest to us was talking to something, but whatever that something was not talking back, because it would make that noise a minute and then it would pause. Its walking would pause. The other one would pause. and then they'd both start walking again, and then it'd make that noise again, and then pause. Excuse me. But anyway, that lasted for probably no more than 2-3 minutes, maybe. At that time, it seemed like an hour and 57 minutes. As I'm laying there waiting on this thing to come in the tent with me. But the next morning, I got up and went up to. I still got it sitting out here. Got an old '78 International Scout, and that's what we had driven up there. And I went up to get the Coleman camp stove and bring it down so I could cook breakfast. And there was a handprint on the mirror of my Scout. And I don't know if y'all can see, I got some monster hands. I have seen a replica of Shaquille O'Neal, and the handprint that was on the side of that on the window. You know how, like, if you go in the window, you'll put your hand up, and look in. Well, that was typically what I figured had happened. But that thing's hand would, if I put my grandbaby's hand in my hand, and that thing, and Shaquille O'Neal put his hand in that thing's hand, that would have been about the same thing. It was absolutely huge. As far as a sighting, I never saw it. I heard it, and I saw the handprint that it left on that Scout. So
wow.
Yeah.
And how far was the Scout? How far was the Scout actually parked away from your tent?
Probably 45 yards, maybe, up the hill.
So that thing had actually got that close into your camp.
Oh, it was a lot closer than that when I heard it. When I was laying in the bed laying in the sleeping bag that night, it was probably maybe 30 feet away from our camp.
It was in your camp, pretty much.
Yes, absolutely. It was definitely in the camp. Can I say definitively to this day what it was? No, I can't. I can tell you
there's nothing in the woods like it's not a bear.
No,
it's not it's not no canines or anything like that. It's not it's not any type of feline or a cat. I mean,
nope. I can tell you what I think it was, but I can't definitively say what it was.
Yeah, I mean,
because I don't know. And one thing that I think I told Ricky about whenever we were talking back and forth, texting each other. When it comes to these things, I am a skeptic, and I think I know what I believe, but I still think that you have to look at evidence from a skeptical point of view if you're ever going to find truth.
Well, of course. I mean, even myself, I've had a visual sighting, and like evidence, like just far as what people present as evidence and everything, I look at everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
Because you don't know somebody's intentions. You don't know, they're just too much in today's world with internet and hoaxing and, everything else. I mean, it's what we were talking about last week. I mean, you can have the best evidence in the world. You can have the best, say, photo, video, footprint, hair sample. You're always going to have people that nitpick and, are going to call it fake pretty much. I mean,
until, and I hate to say this, until we have a type specimen, people are not going to accept what we believe. I can't say what I know because I've never laid eyes on, but there are always going to be people
you can't explain.
Exactly. I don't know what Bigfoot is, what Sasquatch is. I hate that name, Bigfoot. I don't know why I just said it. I know what I think they are, and I know what I would like for them to be. And that's about as definitive as I can get. Yeah. I believe that they are a flesh and blood creature. I believe that they live and die. No clue of lifespan, but I think that they are an ape, as we are apes. We're considered apes. I believe that they are as well. I think that I believe that somewhere along the line, I don't believe that the evolutionary tree, if you want to think about it that way, looks like a telephone pole. I think it looks more like a sourwood tree. It's crooked and it's got branches going everywhere off of it. And I think that they are just another branch on that tree.
Well, guys, my brother called me this morning, and he lives up in Murray County, up in the north end of the county, right on the foot of Grassy Mountain. Doyle had been watching my podcast for a while, and he told me that he had been taking his grandbaby out just to the evenings. Grandson, I think, like 2-3 years old. But he said he'd been taking him out the evenings and doing Bigfoot howls. He said just as a joke. Well, he told me that here a couple of weeks ago, he took his dog out, or a couple of days ago, he took his dog out, and about 4 o'clock in the morning to use the bathroom, and Doyle said he'd stand there, and he said, I thought, I'd just do a yell just to see what had happened. Well, he said he done a yell, and he said that just as soon as he done the yell, there was a bunch of coyotes come back yelling, and then he said there was something that yelled out, man, that he said caused the hair to stand up on his head. And this was 2 days ago. Well, he done it again this morning, he said. And the same thing happened, all except this thing started beating on a tree. He said, started doing wood knocks. And he called me this morning. He said, brother, said, I've been listening to y'all. He said, really, I had no idea that these creatures actually existed until this happened to me this morning. He said, how'd I get rid of them? And I told him, I said, well, Doyle, I said, if you got one in the area, man, and I know the mountain range where he lives at. There's plenty of water source. There's plenty of food source up there for them. There's shelter up there for them. So like I told him, it's kind of hard to get rid of one.
Yeah, really, to me, it would be, if they don't want to leave, they ain't leaving.
No.
I mean, they
have just as much right to the area as we do. That's their land. That's their home. So. I mean, we move into their territory.
I really like to look at, what the Native Americans in the United States and the First Nations people in Canada. I like to really delve into what they believe that these things are. And, it goes from, there's a tribe, a nation in the southwest corner of British Columbia who call it Bakwas. And they have absolutely nothing good to say about that thing. And then you have other tribes who consider them, just another tribe of people, basically. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle on that.
I mean, and you also have, the saying, a lot of tribes believe they were watchers of the land, or seers of the land. I mean, it's, and I say this a lot. The Native Americans are you can almost say that is the greatest evidence to supporting Bigfoot.
Well,
in my opinion, I mean, just the stories and just, everything combined. I mean, I really, that's a big supporter for me, in my opinion.
Not just the Native Americans, but the indigenous people all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
The Aborigines in Australia. telling stories about the Yowie, and the up into Canada, you've got tribes up there who are First Nations people who think that they're evil. There's nothing good about them, and then you've got like the Cherokee in Oklahoma. I'm not real familiar with what the eastern band of Cherokee Indians think about them, but I know that the Cherokee in Oklahoma, they go to the edge of their hunting area and they leave offerings for these things, and because
Right. Now, my grandfather was full-blooded Cherokee. They were from up around Fontana, North Carolina, that area up in there, and his thoughts on it, and he told me just as a young man or young boy that they were, as Blake said, they were watchers of the mountain. That's what he said. They were watchers over the mountain, and that was his whole belief in these creatures. He believed in them. He knew they were out there, but that was his outlook on these creatures, that they were watchers of the mountains.
Like I told you before, Ricky, I am still a believer. I'm not a knower. I've never laid eyes on one. And to be honest with you, I'm fine with being just a believer. If I see one, I want it to be, I'm 55 down the road, that thing's about 200 yards off in a perfectly clear pasture.
Well, I had my first eye-to-eye encounter on one of these things back in 1981. And I've been doing this ever since. I've been researching these things, trying to learn everything I can learn about them since 1984. I'm sorry, and it's been 1981. I had an encounter in '84 up on Big Frog Mountain with something that killed one of my dogs, and that was a rough night for me, and never will forget that one. But my first encounter with one was on Talking Rock Creek in 1981, and I actually saw this thing at about 40 yards. And when I first saw it, I thought it was a bear, but when this thing, it was at the side of a creek. It was knelt down like a man kneeling down with his hands in the water. And when this thing's hands come up out of the water, it's like you said, they were probably twice, 3 times the size of mine, covered in hair down to the back, some of them down to the middle knuckle, big long fingernails, and this thing threw its head back. It never did yell out. It just threw its head back, sniffed the air, turned, and wood line was about 40 yards behind it. And this thing, in 2 boats, it was in the wood line and gone.
Yep. I have really immersed myself the past few years into. I like to keep, my mind works very scientifically, and I like to keep the things that I let enter my mind scientifically based. And I consider eyewitness accounts some of the best evidence, because here's the reason that I say that. My mind works scientifically and mathematically, and statistically, that many people ain't going to be lying about it. If only one person is telling the truth, only one, then there's something there.
Yep.
If we look at it, if there's, if 40% are either people telling a lie or being hoaxed by somebody else, that still leaves a lot of very trustworthy accounts that we can take as evidence. And you have to be able to. My liar meter goes up and down as I'm talking to somebody, and depending on where it ends up at the end of that conversation, is how much weight I put on to what that person has told me. And sometimes it winds up way up here, and I just, that sounds interesting, and I go on about my business, I'm not, but because whatever I believe is not definitive, I can't tell you, yes, that person is telling a lie. I can tell you, I think they are, but it's their, it's their experience.
Yeah, exactly.
It's what
I
happened
mean,
to them.
you weren't there. I mean, you can make assumptions and go off of what you think, but at the same time, it's. I mean, we deal with it all the time, of course. I mean, when you interview people, I mean, you just sometimes we've had a couple on the show that, I'm not my place to say anything, but some things are questionable. But at the
Yeah.
same time, we're here just to let people tell their stories. We're not here to say you saw this or you didn't see this or this
And
happened or this didn't happen.
that's one thing that I appreciate about what I don't know if y'all know him or not, or know the name that I'm fixing to say, but that's one thing that I appreciate about what Steve Isdall's doing is he is just compiling emails from people, and all he's doing is reading them,
I
and
know exactly what you're talking about.
voicing people's experiences for them. He don't put his opinion into it. He just said what he said. Do with it what you want to. And I appreciate what he's doing with that because he's getting a lot of people heard that would otherwise never have their story told to anyone. One other, that's the limit of my experiences, but I do have permission to tell my dad and my uncle's experiences. Again, this happened in White County. Daddy's, we're still questioning whether it was in White County or Lumpkin County because it was right on the line. But anyway, it was up above the gold mines, above Mossy Creek. And he was parked out next to a lake one night. And he was waiting on a girl to come out there and meet him. And he saw this thing walking along the edge of this lake. And my dad's the type of person, he loves to joke around, loves to, see what he can get you to believe, that type of person. But when he is telling you something for truth, you know that he's telling it for truth. And there's no doubt that what he's telling you is true. And I have no doubt that he experienced what I'm fixing to tell you, but he watched this thing walk around the edge of a lake. And he said that he's been a general contractor his whole life. If he tells you something 7.5 foot tall, it's somewhere between 7'5" and 7'7". I mean, he said that thing was about 7.5 feet tall. And he said it was built like, well, Herschel Walker in his heyday wouldn't have had nothing on, basically, is the way he described it. Very muscular. He said it was a real moonlit night. He couldn't get color because, everything was in grayscale. I'm sure you guys have been out in the woods enough to know when just on a moonlit night, everything's grayscale. You don't get color, And he watched it walk around the edge of the lake, and when it got to within about 150 yards, he took off and left. He was out of there. And he said he wishes to this day that he went back the next day to see if he could find any footprints, but he didn't. But he said that thing put a fear into him like he's never had before.
What year did you say that happened in?
That would have been 66 or 7, 66, 67. And it was again north of Cleveland, and it'd be east of Dahlonega, where that happened. And then my uncle, they had some family come over to spend the weekend with them, and he had slipped my other uncle's shoes on the porch to go out and help the family that had came to spend the weekend bring their bags in. and my uncle was older than him. His feet were bigger than my uncle's. I'm talking about two uncles here, so this might get a little confusing. But the uncle that slipped his brother's shoes on, as he was coming back to the house, one of those shoes came off his foot. And he turned around to pick it up, and when he did, he looked back at a chicken house that was up against the side of the mountain. And I'm sure both of y'all are probably familiar with Yawna Mountain, up between Cleveland and Helen. Well, Pink Mountain is right to the side of it, and they lived right at the base of Pink Mountain. And he said this thing come out of an old abandoned chicken house and ran up the side of the mountain. He said that thing was covering ground like nothing you could ever even imagine.
Now, had they ever had any problems with chickens come up missing or anything, or?
Nope. There was no chickens in that chicken house. It was an abandoned chicken house that they stored stuff in. He said he thought, to start with, the first thought that went through his head was somebody's in there stealing something.
Yeah.
Well, when he saw the way that thing took off up the side of that mountain, he said that nobody could run on flat ground as fast as that thing was running up the side.
Side of the mountain.
Yep. And, my uncle, again, he's a jokester, but when he tells you something for truth, you can take it to the bank. And and what's funny is my dad and my uncle, neither one will say that they saw a Bigfoot.
Yeah, they just tell what they saw.
They'll say they seen a booger.
That goes back to a lot of your older people. That's basically what they say. Basically, that's what they saw was instead of saying Sasquatch or Bigfoot, they'll tell you they saw a booger. I know my dad had an encounter over on Springer Mountain. That's where he grew up at, over at LJ. His whole family owned property all over that mountain over there, and he said they started out one morning back then. They had to walk from where they lived at about 1.5 miles, 2 miles up to the main road in order to catch the school bus in the mornings. And he said they had walked up there that morning to catch the old bus that come through there. And he said, I don't know what it was I saw. He said, to this day, I don't know what it was. He said, but he said it's a booger. That's what he said about it. It's a booger.
That's exactly what Daddy and David will tell you they seen as a booger. I know what they described, and they know what they described, but neither one of them will come out and say, I saw a Sasquatch.
We got a comment here on the comment section. Did your uncle, Barry from Praying and Squatching, ask, did your uncle describe what he saw?
Yeah, basically the same description as I just gave of what my dad saw. Just, very, very stocky, muscular, built, 7 foot tall, 7.5 foot tall. My uncle at the time was 10 or 11, I think, when he saw it. So, as a kid, everything seems bigger than what it actually is. So,
right.
To this day, don't know exactly how tall it was, but David will tell you that it was just, a massive, massive being, whatever it was. Just muscular traps, he's talking about the muscles when it was running up the side of the mountain. He could just see muscles rippling as this thing was running up the side of that mountain.
Wow.
I don't consider myself. I guess I would consider myself an armchair researcher. I've got no desire to get out there and find one or see one. I'm satisfied knowing what I know. I always want to learn more, but I'm not going to go out there myself. I'm going to learn vicariously.
You don't want the first-hand experiences.
No, sir. I do not.
Well, everybody tells me, Blake, we're crazy.
Let everybody else have the experiences. You'll learn from their experiences.
Right. I will live vicariously through them.
Everybody tells me and Blake that we're crazy for getting out and doing what we do, but it's something that, like I said, ever since my first sighting, I've wanted to learn all I could about these creatures.
And we've done it unarmed for years. I mean, a lot of people talk about carrying while they're out researching and stuff. And I mean, we've been 15 miles back in the Blue Ridge National Forest. I mean, nobody around for 14 miles, and not really think much about it. I mean, more scared of other things in the woods and necessarily Bigfoot. I mean,
now don't get me wrong. After that happened with me, there was still for years, me and a friend of mine, we would, we used to have a trout season. You weren't able to fish for trout all year long. Just certain times of the year you could fish for trout. Well, opening weekend of trout season, me and him would drive as far north as we could up toward the head of the Chattahoochee River. We'd park and we'd get out and we'd walk for 3 days, back in there fishing. And we'd stay in there, fish for a couple of days, and give ourselves 2 or 3 days to get back out. He dislocated. He's dead now, but he dislocated his shoulder one time while we was up in there, and I had to thank goodness for the training that I had when I was in the military. But I was able to get his arm to go back in socket, but he couldn't use it anymore, so we just came on back out that time. But it didn't stop me from going in the woods, and it's not going to stop me from going in the woods. Now, if I ever see one, that might change. But as of right now, I can say that knowing those things are out there is not going to stop me from doing what I love to do.
Well, of course. I mean, me and Ricky both, we, of course, Ricky had his sighting back in 81. And, I mean, that's the only visual encounter he's ever had. I mean, we've had, multiple other encounters as far as, howls and, rocks being thrown and just the whole genre of things. But, and myself, I actually saw a family back in 2011, and I mean, it's never stopped me from going in the woods, of course, because I mean, I still do the research. I'm a big advocate, as far as fishing and everything. I'm a big bass fisherman, and I spend a lot of time outdoors. But I mean, it definitely makes you more pay attention to things around you more.
Yeah, the friend that I was just talking about, his daddy told me a story one time about seeing the way he described it was a large male, a medium-sized female, and then a juvenile.
That's basically what I saw. I mean, large male, 7.5, 8 foot tall, about 6.5 foot female, and about a 4 foot juvenile.
That's exactly what he described, and he watched them one night on a sandbar on the Sequoia River, down between Helen and Cornelia. Kind of draw a straight line there. It's not a whole lot in between there, but he was crossing a bridge in the car, and he was going real slow, and he just looked over the side. And there they were down there on the sandbar, and he said he stopped and watched them for a little bit. And he's the type of person, he won't tell you a joke because it's a lie.
Yep.
That's the kind of truth teller he is. He won't even tell a joke because there's a lie in there somewhere.
That's, I mean, actually, my sighting was on a body of water as well, so.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, guys. Either, most sightings that take place are either on water or road crossing sightings, where those things are actually traveling from one area to another.
Well, I was listening to, I listen to and watch just about everything I can that's scientifically based. And I'll tell you somebody that I have a ton of respect for because he goes about it scientifically. He looks at it from a skeptic's point of view, and that's Dr. Jeff Melton. And the way he was talking was that, we don't know how many are out there. But he started throwing up some statistics, and and it really made sense to me. And the way he's figured is there's to be no more than, I think he said, 7,600 in North America. And you take 7,600 of something and you spread it out through North America, and no wonder we hadn't found one, or no wonder we hadn't.
Grasp how much uninhabited land there is still in the United States. I mean,
Georgia,
people. Go ahead.
Georgia is very habitat. Is densely habitated.
Yep.
And there's still so much wild area in Georgia. You go up that little corner right there where Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina all meet right there. There are hundreds of square miles of uninhabited forest right there. You get up into the Chattahoochee National Forest, and there's tons of uninhabited area there. Down in Piedmont Wildlife Refuge, there's hundreds of square miles where no visit there. I've never heard down there, but like you said, there's just so much uninhabited area, especially when you get out west.
Yep.
Oh yeah, we got a good friend of ours that does a lot of Bigfoot research out in Colorado, and has come up with some amazing things that he's found over the last couple of years, as far as structures that these creatures have built. A couple of real nice trackways that he's found, all types of stuff that he's found out there, and he's actually got a YouTube channel, or a Facebook channel and YouTube channel. But he notified me, I think it was the day before yesterday, that Facebook had actually canceled his channel because of all his Sasquatch research that he does on it.
And to me, that seems strange, because, well, no, it don't. Not in today's environment. That don't seem strange. I don't know what I was thinking. That's par for the course these days. I'll leave it at that.
Oh yeah, I mean, Blake, you knew what I'm talking about, Zeus.
Yeah.
Yeah, he notified me that they'd actually canceled his Facebook deal. Won't let him do any more research.
We're talking about, finding a body. One of my, this is the way I try to explain to people. Is you take, let's just use bear, for example. We have an idea of the general population of bear within, a certain amount. All right, how many times you actually come across a bear carcass? Very, very, very rare. And we're talking, a large number of bear here in the United States. You take something like a Sasquatch, that the population is probably very minute compared to other animals and other creatures and stuff like that. The chance of you and something that is so elusive, something we don't know if it buries their deceased. The chances of coming across a body is a needle in a haystack.
Well, the other thing too.
I mean,
the other thing too, Blake, you've got to take into account is intelligence. If these things are smart as I think they are, a mountain lion is not real smart, but you're not going to find a dead mountain lion, because they have enough sense to go off where nothing's going to find them.
Yep, exactly.
To die.
Yep. And a lot of animals do that. A lot of animals.
Oh yeah, house cats do that. Dogs do that. It's just in their nature to do it.
Then we don't know how long it takes for their bodies to decompose. So by the time somebody does so happen to be in an area where one did pass away, the chances of it, being there still, is slim to none.
Well, you've got, especially when you get up into the northern climate, we've got squirrels that'll gnaw on bone and antler, and we've got rats that'll do it. But you get up north where there's porcupines, and that's a major part of their diet.
Oh yeah,
bone.
yeah.
And to me, from everything that I can make sense, the further north you go and the further west you go, the greater the population gets. Well, you go further north, and you go further west, you're starting to get into porcupine territory. And again, a major part of the porcupine's diet is bone. They collect them, they eat them. So, when you've got everything else sitting there rotting, basically, and something's eating the bones, your evidence is gone.
Gone, yep. And I mean, even like here in the South, I mean, far as North Georgia, North Georgia is, believed to have one of the bigger populations of Sasquatch than a lot of other places in the South. But I mean, we like we were just saying a little bit ago, we have so much land here that nobody ever is on. I mean, I don't know if you've ever flown into Atlanta Airport. Like I personally haven't, but I've talked to many people that have. I mean, we, look how big Atlanta is. I mean, I've heard it looks like a forest when you're flying into Atlanta. I mean,
it does. When you're coming into Jackson Hartsville airport down there, from the sky, it actually looks like you're flying into a forest. Is what it looks like.
It does. I've flown into that airport more times than I care to recall. And,
but it
put that in
does.
perspective, and you come up here to our mountains. There's just so much land. There's so much land that has nobody on it.
Yep, and you've got to think too that the only reports that we know, the only way that we know or that we can account for a Sasquatch is where a Sasquatch and a person path cross at the same time.
Right.
And that cuts down tremendously on if it was a being that we could put a tracking collar on or something like that, then we'd know a lot better about population densities, and because you got to think that they encounter each other more than we encounter them. But as elusive as I believe that they are, it doesn't surprise. I can't count lack of a body. I can't put enough weight on that to discount the possibility of them existing. I just can't do it.
Well, like you said, if you take all the reports over, say, a 200, let's just go back in history a little bit. Let's say 300 years of sightings, of encounters. Like you said, all it takes is one out of all those to validate something to a certain extent. People,
and everybody can't be mistaken, and everybody can't be lying.
Yep,
that's the way I look at it.
100%. Couldn't say it better myself.
I listened to a podcast last night. I forget who it was. I forget whose podcast it was, but it was a pastor that was telling the story, of an encounter that he had. And I know there's plenty of pastors out there with not so good reputations, but I would tend to put more weight on, look at what all he's got to lose if it is found out he's lying, But like I said, those are my experiences. That's where I'm at on this thing. I'm probably the most boring interview y'all have ever had because I haven't actually seen one.
Well,
no, but your knowledge. I like the way your brain thinks. I like talking to people that kind of have the same thought process as I do about it, because it's all theories. I mean, that's the thing about a subject like Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You don't truly have no experts. You may have experts in certain types of fields, but nothing directly relating Bigfoot.
You can't go to a university and get a degree in cryptozoology.
Exactly.
You can go to a university and get a degree in anthropology and biology, but you can't go to a university and get a degree in cryptozoology. So, you know, people have to do the best they can with what they've got.
Yep.
You know, and I think one thing that the internet has done is put more knowledge out there about these things. And I think it's kind of like the banjo. You know, after Deliverance, for a lot of years, it wasn't cool to play a banjo.
Right.
But you know, now it's somewhat acceptable to play a banjo. And I think it's kind of that way with Sasquatch too. You know that.
Oh yeah, it's becoming more.
It's more mainstream now.
Yep.
You know,
it's not like back in say the early 50s and 40s, or just go however long, just throwing some numbers out.
Well, in 1981, I had my sighting, guys, and they were probably 30 years before I even really actually told of my encounter, told what I actually saw.
Yep.
You know, I never told about seeing that handprint first person I ever told about it was my dad. And I told him about it less than 2 months ago. You know, and that
makes you realize, though, how many people have probably had something happen to them that they just never speak of.
Yeah. But, you know, again, it's more acceptable now because there's people like you guys out here who are letting people tell their stories. And the more people that come out and tell their stories, the more people who are going to feel comfortable telling the ones that they have held in for the last 30, 40 years.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and the more people that share their experiences and talk about things that they know and if it happened, that helps researchers. That helps, that's a big contributing factor to learning behavior, to learning, certain aspects about the creatures. I mean, like you said, like you're saying, I mean, you can't, you got to take a lot of them with a grain of salt, but, say you talk to 100 people, at least 10 of those or more are going to be trustworthy people.
Yeah. And, again, I go down here to the creek beside my house and I see coon tracks down there, but I don't see a coon. Well, you know what? I know there was a coon there. he left his evidence,
Yep.
So why is the evidence that we find, if we can 100% rule out a hoax, then why is the evidence that we find not taken seriously? Again,
it goes back to mainstream science screaming that unless they have a body, there's no proof. With even the evidence that we've got, that's still the key factor into all of this. And that's one thing that I do not believe, guys. I do not believe in killing one of these creatures just to produce a body so they can cut it up.
I don't either, Rick, but what I've said a lot of times is I wouldn't be mad if a log truck in Oregon was to hit one.
Right. Now I will agree with you on that, Chuck.
Natural selection just kind of took over at that point. I mean,
yeah, he wouldn't have to feel guilty about killing it. From everything that I found, if I were to see one of these things, I honestly, if I had a weapon in my hand that I thought could take it down, I honestly don't think that that I could do it. To me,
Well,
from all the evidence that's out there, there's just too much of an intelligence there
For me to want to
that's
kill, yeah.
that's something
for
that
me
you
to
hear
want
a
to kill
lot
them.
of too. Is like, say a hunter in a deer stand. There are multiple stories of them. Getting them in the scope, and having a chance to shoot one, and just something about this creature. They're just too much intelligence and too much. It's just they can't do it when they actually have the chance to do it.
Yeah, it's it's kind of like at a. Y'all ever hear the old Jerry Clyer joke about the coon hunting monkey?
Oh, yeah.
When he turned that thing loose, Marcel started screaming. He said, "Put that thing up. That's too much like folks." It's that's kind of the way I look at these things. But I've done a little bit of reading from Dr. Grover Krantz. Have y'all hear with him?
Oh, yes. Oh,
the
yeah.
work that he did over the years. That with he was one of the biggest proponents of these things back in its infancy as far as the stuff, and he said that it would take a body for to actually accept it. There's plenty of work that's been done on DNA, but I've read the papers that were done, and to me there was a lot of fault in the not in it wasn't fault in a they meant to do it kind of way. It was almost like some careless things that I think that they did that I can't really take. I have to take that with a grain of salt, and that's the work that Dr. Melba Ketchum did.
Right.
There was just they used the wrong something that they put in to multiply the DNA to make the DNA strands longer, and the only one that they had that they could use was a one from a human, or that would replicate human DNA, and it came back partly human DNA. Well, if you use that replicator, that's the way it's going to come back. So to me, there was a lot of fault in that, but at the same time, I think that there was a lot of work that went into that came out good. I think that they probably did retrieve some Sasquatch DNA, but I don't think that the methods that they use would allow them to prove it definitively.
Right.
Well, it's still like you said, without unless you've actually got a body laying there on the slab that they can actually pull the DNA out of, pull the blood out of, whatever they do. It's not going to be good enough for them.
Yeah, DNA is not going to do it, and it's y'all probably know where I'm going with this, but one thing that I just get so fed up with is the picture with the red circle. And I know y'all know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
If you got to circle it, I don't want to see
there. It. Yep.
No.
I'm tired of seeing, and if you look in some of the Facebook,
it's called what is it, paraphernalia or something like that. It's basically where your mind thinks it's seeing one thing that's there when it's actually not. I mean, like it's power and it's power of suggestion as well. So if somebody circles something in a picture and gives a reference to what it is, you might, your brain might start telling you that's what's in that picture when it's in reality there's nothing there.
Rick, if you'll look in the Facebook group that you and I are in together, right, you'll see a picture that I posted in there of my ceiling, and if I look at just the right place on my ceiling, it's got knockdown, sheetrock knockdown.
Right.
And there is the perfect shape of a monkey with a tail. If you look hard enough, you can see it.
Yep.
But to me, that just gets, it's no different than looking into the clouds and seeing a little boy with a goat, or people just trying to see things that if you got to circle it out. In other words, if you got to circle it, I don't want to see it. Those accounts. I hate to say this to bust people's bubbles, but those accounts are doing absolutely nothing to further the research. If anything, they're detrimental to it, because it just shows how much pareidolia is out there, and people that are making claims on a squiggly line in a bush. To me, that does absolutely no good.
Well, there's people that are doing that are mainly doing it for attention. They're not trying to put out no real evidence. I mean,
I agree with you. I agree with you totally.
All right, well, guys, we're a little over the hour mark here. Close this thing out. Say good night to everybody. Chuck, I want to thank you, buddy, for being on the show. Anytime you want to come back and do another interview with us, feel free to hit me up, and we'll be glad to have you back on.
I've given you all I can give you as far as experiences goes, but if y'all ever want to have a conversation, y'all just let me know.
We have a lot of conversations on our podcast. This is typically what it ends up going into, is a whole conversation.
That's basically it.
Like I said, my accounts are probably the most boring that there ever has been, because nothing exciting happened. But I can't tell something that did happen when it did.
Hey, anybody's got a handprint on a vehicle like that, that's interesting to me.
Yep.
It really is, buddy. I'm telling you.
When I did my interview with the only other time I've ever told this in a public forum, he had asked me about something about some new stuff that's coming out about slime that these things leave.
Yep.
And he asked me if that was there, and I can't to this day remember if it was a heavy dew or a heavy frost. But I can't remember how cold it was, to where I was able to see that handprint. But I do remember that there was nothing like that on there. It was just a handprint.
Just a handprint.
Yep. But I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate what you guys do, and I thank y'all for having me on.
You got anything else for Chuck before I close her out?
What?
I said, you got anything else for Chuck before we close out?
No, I thought you were talking. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to Chuck. I'm sorry. No. Thank you, brother. Good meeting you. Like Ricky said, you've got a personal invite anytime you want to come back on the show if you just want to have a conversation.
All right, guys. I sure do appreciate it.
All right, buddy. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Everyone that's watched tonight, we're glad you're tuning in and watching the show. Blake, go ahead and close her out, buddy.
Can't thank you guys enough for your support. If you don't mind, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button, bell notification, like, and a comment. And I hope everyone has a great night, and see you guys next week.
All right, guys. Everybody stay safe. God bless. And everybody really stay safe with this corona deal going on. Chuck, thank you again. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Blake, let me end her here, buddy.